2002's Punch Drunk Love. So this is directed and written by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Adam Sandler, Emily Watson, Philip Seymour Hoffman, making his second performance this episode so far, or second appearance this episode so far, Louise Guzman. IMDb plot summary: socially frustrated Barry Egan calls a phone sex line to curb his loneliness. Little does he know it will land him in deep trouble and will jeopardize his burgeoning romance with the mysterious Lena. So for me, this movie represents anxiety in two ways. One is a sense of social anxiety that is something that I had much earlier in life, high school, early college, of just being around people or being in places where you just feel very, very socially awkward and you don't really know what to say or what to do. And this movie does a great job of capturing that. And then the second thing that does give me anxiety too is that anxiety that comes along with feeling attracted to someone, like that very early on sense when you're first starting dating, or maybe you see someone across the room or you're working with someone and you start to develop those feelings, and how that makes you anxious and also causes, again, more social anxiety, which is something that I feel like I'm not a victim of anymore, or something that I don't deal with, but I definitely did earlier on in life. And this movie always brings me right back to that. So to start, actually, before I get into more of those themes, and is this a movie you'd seen before? And what are your thoughts on Punch Drunk Love?
Yeah, I'd seen this movie before, quite enjoyed it. I don't think I had the stomach for it to fully take it because I watched it pretty early in my kind of, film loving phase, if you will. And unlike a lot of PTA movies, I think this movie has a lot of silence and sparseness, but then it sort of ratchets up, slowly and slowly. So it needed, I think I had needed to evolve in my film loving journey, if you will, to kind of fully come to this movie. But it was really great to watch it again because I had not seen it since. And I guess say I'm unofficially a PTA head, as you've told me through this podcast, even though I don't prescribe to any group or cult of any kind of fandom, so that I have an aversion to that. But I do love everything he's made. There's no question. Like, he's one of our most talented filmmakers ever. So this movie is amazing. I think the color palette, the sound design, and kind of being in the mind of the person, in which case, this case is Adam Sandler. You're literally in his mind. The entire movie, for the most part, is from his point of view.
Oh, yeah.
To the point that, that feeling of social anxiety is sort of manifested physically in this movie through sound and spaces and color and such. And it's definitely an uncomfortable place to be in. Like, for me, falling in love with somebody, or, feeling those feelings, like you said, it's an anxious thing, but it's mostly a happy, anxious, giddy thing, as opposed to the other way around. So it does grate at me because I mean, that's the point. It's supposed to make you very uncomfortable, but it's also brilliant because you have Adam Sandler, who's probably one of the most lovable, people you can put on screen. So I think it's great casting, because if this person was a different actor, I think the physical manifestation of anxiety and their own persona could probably get too much. And I think he doesn't lose that balance, PTA.
No, definitely not.
Rooting for Adam Sandler, and you want to be in this space, even though it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. To get more into my thoughts on the film, I'll start with Sandler. So he's an actor who in the 90s was huge for his comedies. I was not at all a fan, did not like him as a comedian in any way, still don't to this day like any of his comedy movies. And this movie, when P.T. Anderson actually wrote it for him and went to him and said, I wrote a movie for you, I want you to be in this part, he was at first like afraid, didn't want to do it, and then did. And I remember at the time when this came out, because I saw this in the theaters, being like, oh, great, I have to see an Adam Sandler movie now because he's in a P.T. Anderson film. Like, this is weird. Like, he can't pull off drama. Like, what is this? Like, this isn't going to work. And just being blown away by his performance. And then he is able to capture that, like, incredibly anxious, wound up, socially awkward, very odd, which are all things that were in his comedic performances too, like a Waterboy or Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison. They're all elements of this wound up, anxious character, but with played up more of the comedy. And in this film, it definitely plays up a lot more of that social awkwardness. And to me, it's like I go right back to, he's sort of like the embodiment of my anxieties, Adam Sandler can be. And it works so well. I mean, again, getting to the social anxiety piece, there's a scene, he has all these sisters who always are ragging on him his entire life. And he goes over to one of their houses early on, and he's sort of like standing at the door. He goes in, he comes back out, he goes in again. He's like afraid to kind of get into the house. And, again, I've definitely been there where it's like you go to a party, you don't really know many people. you don't really want to be there, but you feel like you're trying to force yourself. And it's like, oh, I don't
Right.
know. And then when you get in there, it's just like all this stuff happening, and they're throwing him questions, asking him this. Everyone's talking over one another, sort of like an Altman film, but sort of a horror version of it. And I just get, again, that social anxiety feel. I just got to get out of the room. And he does walk out of the room and just sort of is in the other room, just like, I can't even get in there because of all these people and stuff. And that is, again, when I felt issues of social anxiety back when I was much younger, these were all things that I definitely felt and could relate to, though not to the extreme where he then kicks like a glass door because he's
Right.
so wound up. I never got like violent or anything like that, but I can relate to sort of that being so wound up because you're just around all these people that just cause you anxiety. And, you know, like you mentioned earlier too, like the John Bryan score is this weird sort of like melodic, but doesn't really have much of a form or structure to it. And that all adds also to this.
Little off.
It's a little off, right? That whole adds to this whole mise en scène that PTA is creating in this film. And it just works so brilliantly that it just ratchets all that up in all those scenes with his sisters, which is definitely, every time again I watch it, I'm like, oh my God, like I would just get out of this room, Barry, just get out of this room.
Yeah, the sisters are great, and also it's amazing how alike they all look, and the casting is so brilliant. I'm stating the obvious. The other thing is about this movie is the magical love, if you will, which it's almost sort of hard to wrap your head around because I'm not even sure if that's real or is that Barry's imagination, and the way it's presented is just so interesting that it takes you, grabs you, but is also magical, is also anxiety inducing. It's just kind of an indescribable thing, which is sort of what love can be. So again, it's like a physical manifestation of love in a person.
Right. But I almost feel like it's love that he's either never felt before or is uncomfortable with, because clearly he didn't get love from his sisters. They were ragging on him his whole life, right? So he's having love and having feelings towards Emily Watson makes him anxious because he doesn't know what to do, and he's awkward around her, and she's a little awkward around him, and they have a very strange sort of courtship process, which again, I'm like, okay, that is sort of what dating can be like. Yes, it can be magical and the anxiousness feels like butterflies, but sometimes, at least for me, it can feel like sort of knots in your stomach, like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, what if I say the wrong thing? And what, you know, what's going on? And I think another use of music in this film is just this brilliant song that's actually from Altman's Popeye that they use in this track that Shelley Duvall sings about He Needs Me. And it's really weird. And Shelley Duvall's kind of weird sort of anyway. And the vocals are kind of odd. It's like, that's the love theme, quote unquote, of this film. And I think it does capture the awkwardness of love or attraction that is, again, something that definitely I can relate to in terms of dating anxiety there.
Yeah, no, pretty amazing. Of course, this is a PTA film. You know,
it's great.
Nobody else can pull this off, I think.
No, it's actually in my top 3 favorite films of his. Like, I come back to this a lot. I mean, it's also short. It's like 90 minutes. This is back in the day where he would be making like Boogie Nights and Magnolia that are like these big, long, sort of dramatic epics. And this at the time was just a very surprising film that he's adding to his filmography at this time that people were shocked and didn't know really what to make of this. But I think it's aged very well over time. And I loved it when I first saw it in theaters. I'm like, oh my God, like, do I like Adam Sandler now? This is odd. It's a movie, again, that I come back to a lot. And just the use of color, like you said, it's just fantastic. Philip Seymour Hoffman also, barely in the movie, but that one scene where he's like yelling at him on the phone, it's just such a great piece of acting. Just an incredible actor.
Amazing. I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman is amazing in general, but I think when it comes to like yelling acting to the point where the voice is not even coming from his stomach, it's coming from somewhere even lower.
Yeah.
Your face is red and it's sort of vibrating. Like your entire being is being hurled at another person. Like that's what he does. And we just talked about doubt. There's so many of scenes in that movie as well. Like, you want to leave the room if that were happening to you, for sure.
Oh yeah, just an incredible performance. And another thing that I just thought was always interesting about this movie was one of the inspirations for PTA to even write it, other than Adam Sandler wanting to make a movie with him, was that whole pudding subplot is a real thing. Someone actually did that, which I think is like so crazy. Like in the late 90s, someone figured the same thing out that Barry Egan does. And for folks who haven't seen the film, there was some contest or sweepstakes where if you bought Healthy Choice, you could redeem them, Healthy Choice products at the grocery store, you could redeem them for airline miles. And he did all this math to realize if he bought these pudding packs, he could be buying like 1 million airline miles at like 90% discount. So someone did this, and it's not even like probably even like the B plot of this movie. It's like the C plot, but I always found that so interesting. And then when I realized, I read later on online a couple years after the movie came out, like someone actually did this. That's so crazy. Like you could build a movie just around that. That could have been the A plot of the movie, someone doing this. I just love how PTA was inspired by this real life thing and woven it in here in a way that makes sense, of him obsessing over these coupons in the same way that he's obsessing over all these different things in his life, causing him anxiety, but just that it's not even the A or B plot.
It's amazing. But see, that's the kind of thing PTA would do, as opposed to go and make dumb money, or all the billion movies about like failed businesses or weird, Ponzi schemes, because they're shallow, and that's not the point. The point is actually the real lives of people, which is then intersected with like these oddities of, companies going up and down, or Ponzi schemes being flared up, or what have you. And he can see that.
Yeah, no, he's brilliant. And I don't know if you've gotten lost on the internet about the Superman themes in this movie, if you've heard those theories. Yeah, that this movie is a story about Superman. Barry Egan is in the film wearing a blue suit the whole time. He demonstrates super strength by breaking the glass. There's even a scene where he can break a plunger. This business is like fake plungers, where he's breaking the plunger, but no one else can, because he has superhuman strength. And there's a scene at the end of the movie when Emily Watson is in this red dress, sort of like hugs him and gives him the cape of Superman. So there's this whole thing about how it's supposed to be again, this is a weird internet theory, but now when I read that, I'm looking for those themes in here too. I mean, maybe this is P.T. Anderson's way of doing the story of Superman. It's just interesting.
I doubt that. This is nerd theory being slapped on
you never know with PTA, is what I'm saying. Okay, why don't we move on to your number 2 film that shaped your anxieties? What do you got for us, Karan?
All right, so I have another movie from 2008, which sort of says a lot about where I was at in my head in 2008.
It does. Yeah.
And really, I watched these movies in 2009, which makes sense because I just come out of grad school. I just moved to LA. I was watching more movies. I was also alone and kind of figuring life out post school. So it makes sense.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.